Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our board meeting. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Megan, will you call the roll?
Trustee Lautner?
Here.
Trustee Dora?
Here.
Trustee Seidel?
Here.
Trustee Council?
Here.
Trustee Sheehan?
Here.
Trustee Stewart?
Here.
President DeCiccio?
Here.
A quorum is present, Mr. President.
Thank you, Megan. Representative LaShawn Ford could not make it tonight. He's attending the funeral for the police officer that lost her life. So he'll come to our next board meeting. So we'll move on to public participation of agenda and non-agenda related items. If anyone would care to speak to the board, please step up to the mic and give us your name.
Hi, my name is Jason Kowalczyk. I live in the Grange Park for the last 14 years. I just want to make a quick comment about sewer infrastructure. Obviously, it's a topic that's it's either on this agenda and maybe last meeting too, or last month. I just want to say I know this is a huge problem. Obviously, it's not a simple one to fix. It may never be 100% fixed, but I just want to again say that I think it's a crucial issue, and it's not something that can be waited on too long. I know I read something about a project in 2026. That's too long to wait. So I think as residents, we have to understand that it may cost us some money to get this fixed, and everyone's got to put in a share. This system was built before we were even alive, probably, and people paid for it, and we're enjoying it. So we have a responsibility to pay for our share too when it needs repair. So I understand it's difficult to ask residents to pay for things. This affects every resident. It's important, and I really would plead with the board to actually take some action on this. I know certain things have been done. They're Band-Aids. We need a solution. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. Anyone else care to speak to the board? Okay, so I'm going to move up number 7, if that's okay with the board, since we have Sharon's with us tonight. So I'm going to ask Trustee Sheehan to do the Public Works Committee first.
Well, all right.
7B.
7B.
That's the presentation, right, Mr. President?
No, it's the
Electric?
yes, residential electrical aggregation.
Okay.
Thank you, Trustee Sheehan. Sorry.
We gotta hurry up and do this before the electric goes out tonight. Purpose is thank you. Purpose residential electrical aggregation program. The village's electric aggregation program is due for renewal in November of this year. Sharon Derling from NIMEC will provide a presentation on our current program and provide options for the village board consideration. General background: in 2018, the village entered into an agreement with MC Squared to secure an electrical contract to provide LaGrange Park's homes with 100% green energy at or below the current ComEd rate. The program also earned the village a designation as an EPA Green Power Partner Community, reducing the village's carbon footprint by the equivalent of 100 million pounds of coal burn. Due to the upcoming contract expiration, NIMEC, on the village's behalf, solicited bids to determine if cost savings or 100% green RECs were a viable option through the resident aggregation program. The results demonstrate that all bids received were above the current annualized ComEd rate, 7.127 cents per kilowatt hour, and there were no affordable options for the 100% green RECs. As the renewable generation markets have expanded, demand has dramatically increased. No power supplier can currently offer 100% renewable energy for the village, as they are unable to acquire sufficient volumes at a reasonable price. NYMEX solicited pricing from 6 suppliers and received 2 bids from 2 suppliers that offer green renewable energy certificates as part of a residential aggregation program, matching ComEd pricing. They're included MC Squared, our incumbent provider, and Elijah and continue to serve the program with sufficient RECs to retain the village's status as an EPA green power partner, but not at the 100% green level. Option 1, MC Squared program details, 0 added cost, 0 rate risk. Pricing guaranteed to match ComEd rate, includes ComEd's variable monthly portion called the Purchase Electricity Adjustment, or PEA. LaGrange Park retains designation as EPA Green Power Partner, retains continuity of program. Village consultant will continue to seek bids in upcoming years to discover if savings again available and to revert to 100% renewable. Last point is 12 to 24 month term option. Side note, due to deregulation in Illinois, ComEd no longer supplies energy delivered by ComEd. That doesn't make sense. Oh, due to deregulation in Illinois, ComEd no longer supplies energy delivered by ComEd. The Illinois Power Agency, IPA, state agency, procures all energy provided by ComEd. How the ComEd price match program works: every electric account establishes unique usage consumption patterns based on volume during peak demand periods. The cost to produce electricity is highly variable and by law must be perpetually available on demand. Suppliers calculate the actual historical cost of serving each account. Suppliers send out opt-out notices to ratepayers for which cost to serve is lower than ComEd rate. Accounts deemed costlier to serve receive an informative only notice and remain at ComEd. The supplier is able to purchase renewable energy certificates, RECs, the sole currency for green energy for all eligible residents, including those remaining at ComEd. Residents may choose to be served by the supplier or ComEd because customer choice is the law in Illinois as it pertains to electric supply. Option 2, suspend the program. End the residential electrical aggregation program and move all residential and small business customers back to ComEd. Everyone pays the ComEd rate. The village does not retain EPA designation. The village's consultants will continue to seek bids in upcoming years to determine if savings are available and revert to 100% renewables. Staff's recommendation, this is for discussion only. If the board agrees to continue the program, staff will provide an updated memo for action at the board meeting for August 24th. Better? Okay. Staff will provide an updated memo for action at the regular board meeting on August 24th. There's no action. This is for discussion only. If the village board prefers to maintain the residential electrical aggregation program, NYMEC will solicit final pricing, and staff will facilitate a final agreement for the board's consideration at the August village board meeting. If the village board prefers to revert all customers back to ComEd and end the residential aggregation program, no formal action is required, as the contract will come to an end in November. And you see the documentation that's provided in our packet. So with that, I'll turn it over to our representative.
Thank you, Trustee Sheehan.
Thank you.
Sharon, thank you.
Thank you. That feels really close. Is that okay? I just put up a quick history of what you've accomplished as a board under Julia's leadership, because she started the first electric aggregation program in, I think, March of 2012. You presented it to your voters, and over a course of just 2 years, $1.26 million were saved. It was $319 per average participating household. That was a great start. And you suspended the program as a board when sort of the party was over, so to speak. There was no more savings available. And I would keep in touch with Julia from time to time, and she kind of picked up and led, LaGrange Park as one of the first communities to begin this program where it's a ComEd price match. We since have 77 other municipalities, complete counties from Zion to Kankakee. So kudos, if I can just say, for, kind of leading the way. So just in the 3 years equivalent, as Trustee Sheehan had read off, equivalent to reducing greenhouse gases by 224 million auto miles, average car, or equivalent of reduction of carbon dioxide, 100 million pounds of coal burn. So at zero added cost for what you did for the village. So, and this is to replicate the bids received. To be clear, there were bids available for a 2-year term that were lower than today's ComEd annualized rate. And I will say that is moot because we do have some intel and know, this is good news for everyone, that the ComEd rate is going to be reduced significantly June 1st. So, as they say, a rising tide floats all boats. Well, the ComEd rate will come down, and that will be great for everyone's personal electric power bill. But we wouldn't recommend those rates that were under 7 because we know you would be underwater next year. So, the proposal is to continue the program as you currently have, which is exactly the ComEd rate, which does vary slightly from month to month. Zero cost to ratepayers, zero cost to village. We don't charge a fee, no rate risk. And as always, ratepayers may opt out. That's important. Customer choice. You currently are ranked number 6 in the nation in terms of percentage green power consumed by way of renewable energy certificates purchased and retired on behalf of the village. In the United States, you were at number 1 last time I was here. That was a great day, but when you're number 1, there's really hard to maintain. Where can you go? You can't go higher. 2 things have happened. The pandemic, my mask is, I'm having trouble breathing a little bit, but I'm okay. And that pandemic brought folks home. It changed a lot of the dynamics of the market, and it's just changed a whole lot of things that impact pricing that aren't really favorable for some residents, but we're still able to offer the program, and there are some narrow margins. Another thing happened that was a shock on June 3rd. There's a capacity auction. I won't get too much into the weeds. That really impact the ability for a supplier to make profits and continue to offer you 100% renewable energy, which is getting increasingly expensive, as I said to Julia. Corporations, you kind of led the way as a municipality, and a lot of the big tech companies are hugely demanding the wind generation green energy that we're able to procure for you. So 2 suppliers offer this, Eligo and MC Squared. To continue your EPA certification, MC Squared could do that, and that is, honestly, it's about 5% green energy, but with the 19% that's already baked into your ComEd bill, it comes out to a net of about 24% green energy, and that's the best offer we could get today. You can do that for 1 or 2 year terms. I was just going to mention that this doesn't really affect the power mix that feeds into the PJM interconnection that stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland, because we share our electric grid with about 16 states, or is it 13? I forget, 13 to 16 states. So the mix is still there, but with the renewable energy, you're supporting Midwest wind generation facilities. And this is just a little picture that I put there because I love to see it. If you ever want to watch that little video, it's 3 minutes, tinyurl.com/greenepa, shows how it is that what you're doing is really a thing, that green energy is being generated by windmills, not here in your village limits, but they're fed into the power grid, and you're, at zero added cost, you're supporting that. So that's finished there, and I would take any questions or comments, and then you may want to discuss 1 or 2 year term.
Thank you, Sharon. Any trustee have any questions for Sharon? Okay, discussion, trustee Sheehan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Thinking back in the first came to the board when I first came on in 2013, it's going on 8 years, and each time you do a remarkable job, you show so much passion for what you deliver to us. So I appreciate you coming out tonight. I mean, the only thing I see, really, is that we stay with option one. I don't think option two, I would support option one. I guess maybe in a year or two, we probably have a lot of questions with like the nuclear plants, 2 in Illinois set to come offline. So I imagine pricing is gonna go up. So we'll probably have problems with that down the road. But, Mr. President, at this time, I would support option one, and thanks again, Shannon.
Thank you, trustee Sheehan. Trustee Stewart?
Hi, yeah, I would agree with trustee Sheehan as well. I think maintaining the designation as a power partner is important. And you mentioned something in June about the ComEd rate, like, dropping.
We anticipate it to drop because there's a portion of it called capacity that we already know the price of that starts next June. So yes, it could drop into the mid-6s or what analysts are projecting.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think it's good to probably keep this program going, maybe for a 1-year term. But I think suspending the program is probably not the best option, in my opinion. So,
Thank you, trustee Stewart. Trustee Council?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would have to say I agree with option one. I would hate for us to lose the designation, even though I don't believe that ComEd is going to lower their rates significantly. I kind of have some inside information, so I'm hoping that they would, but I really don't know that they will. And if we did drop out of option one and go to option two, is there a way to get back into that other option?
You can suspend the program and restart it at any time. Now, if you went back to the same supplier, and there's really one best option, MC squared, there's a law regulation that you can't go back to the same supplier for a 6-month period.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Seidel?
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with my fellow trustees. I'm in support of option one, and I'm in support of a 1-year term.
Thank you. Trustee Zora?
Thank you. I also agree with option one with the 12-month term. I'm just concerned about switching to ComEd because there's a lot of variation in their rate every month, and I'm hoping that maybe in 12 months when people are back in the office, things will change. So I would vote for option one with the 12-month term.
Thank you. Trustee Lautner?
If I can find the strap on this thing. Thank you, Mr. President. I would concur. I mean, I think that the price guarantee that we're looking at, the experience that we've had, the commitment for continuing renewable energy source, but I also would support the 1-year expansion is where I would be with this. But I think it's been a good program, and I think it's from the experience that we've had with it, I think that we should maintain that path.
Thank you, Trustee Lautner. Sharon, thank you for being here, number one. And yes, I agree with my fellow trustees. So Julia, the direction then, and I assume everyone's on board, the direction then, Julia, is to secure what pricing and facilitate a final agreement?
Yes, Mr. President, what we would do is get final pricing with Sharon. Rick
Okay.
is actually leading this project on behalf of staff, so thank you very much, Rick, for all of the work that you've done with Sharon on this project. But he'll secure final pricing from Sharon. We'll get the contract from Sharon from MC squared, and we would send that contract to Kathy Keating for her to take a look and make sure that everything's in good order in time for the board meeting, for the board's approval.
Great. Thank you, Julia. Rick, do you have any comments?
No, this is my first time doing it, so I'm excited and,
Yeah, I was excited about it, taking this on and working with Sharon on this. It's, exciting to be in that green energy, especially being a part of the sustainability, they're going to be excited to hear this as well. So I think it's a good program.
Thank you, Rick. I mentioned you, and then Sharon goes thumbs up, so we're good. Thank you,
I
Sharon.
did have a comment. These, both suppliers did say they would hold these prices firm through your August 24 meeting, so they're firm and final.
Okay,
pricing, so
great.
You're good to go.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Trustee Sheehan, we'll wait on doing 7A when we get to it. That's okay with you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, moving on, Building and Zoning Committee Trustee Zor is going to recuse herself. So Trustee Lautner, would you please do the report?
Certainly, Mr. President. Okay, this is regarding special use permit and variation request for 704-722 East 31st Street in cases number 21-004, number 21-005, and number 21-006. And the background on this is that the subject property, commonly referred to as Plaza 31, is located at 704-722 East 31st Street. The property is 31,307 square feet and bordered by 31st Street to the north, Barnesdale Road to the east, Homestead Road to the west, and single-family homes to the south. The property is in the C1 Commercial District and improved with a single-story, 12,427 square foot strip mall, which contains 9 storefronts. 7 of the 9 storefronts are currently occupied by a convenience store, a hair salon, fitness facility, and 3 restaurants. A shared parking lot is located on the north side of the property and contains 42 parking stalls. 6 additional parking stalls are located east of the property along Barnesdale Road. Plaza 31 LLC, which is the applicant for this, has made strategic improvements over the last several years to bring the building into compliance with current codes, create more marketable tenant spaces, and enhance the overall aesthetics of the shopping center. Hopefully everyone would agree. The applicant has upgraded and replaced mechanical systems, upsized the water service line, installed fire sprinklers, and made other interior improvements. They've also replaced the front facade, installed new wall signs for individual tenants, installed new lighting, painted the south wall of the building, replaced the fencing at the rear of the property, and reconstructed the parking lot. The applicant is now seeking to incorporate shared outdoor dining and multi-tenant monument sign as final upgrades to the property. To that end, the applicant has applied for the following zoning approvals. Number 1, application for a special use permit for outdoor dining. Number 2, application for a variation for monument sign area and height. And number 3, application for a variation for interior parking lot landscaping. The Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing regarding the applications on July 20th of 2021. The applicant attended the hearing and provided testimony. The minutes from the meeting, court reporter transcript, and approved findings of fact are attached to this memorandum. Upon conclusion on the public hearing, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the special use permit for outdoor dining by a vote of 7-0. Approval of the variation for monument sign area and height by a vote of 6-1, and approval of the variation for interior parking lot landscaping by a vote of 7-0. Staff recommends the concurrence with the recommendations of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Let me rephrase that. Staff concurs with the recommendations of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So 3 items are up for discussion. I turned off my Mac. Okay. 3 items are up for potential motion, and I will make the first motion and then have that discussed, then the second, and then the third. So 3 separate motions. First one is motion to approve an ordinance granting a special use permit for outdoor dining for 704-722 East 31st Street, Plaza 31, LLC, case number 21-004.
A motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion, Trustee Lautner?
Thank you, Mr. President. In looking into this and reviewing the background and the notes from the Planning and Zoning Committee, which I think was very thoroughly discussed from what I could tell from the text and reading the text and the information that was provided, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's a continuation of trying to advance the the business environment of that area. Hopefully everyone in the community, well, everyone that passes that area has seen some significant improvements and significant investment of monies and time and effort to, I think, drastically improve that area. And I think the availability of outdoor dining would be a significant positive advancement. So I would heartily support the amendment.
Thank you, Trustee Lautner. Trustee Seidel?
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with Trustee Lautner. They've made a lot of improvements. This just helps the property and the residents, so I am in full support of this.
Thank you. Trustee Council?
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with my constituents. The outdoor dining, I think, is a great option. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Stewart?
I also agree with the fellow trustees. I think with the addition of Rosati's and also Eno's doing very well, and we have 3 restaurants there, so I think it's important to have that option to be able to dine outside when there's nice weather. So
Thank you, Trustee Stewart. Trustee Sheehan?
Thank you, Mr. President. I greatly appreciate the investment in the property and offering outdoor dining for residents and customers. I think is a plus to the area, so I definitely support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Sheehan. Maggie, do you have any comments?
No, nothing to add, but happy to answer any questions that any
Great.
trustees may have.
For Maggie? See, Julia, any comments? Okay, seeing none, Megan, will you call the roll, please?
Trustee Lautner?
Yes.
Trustee Dorr recused herself from the vote. Trustee Seidel?
Yes.
Trustee Council?
Yes.
Trustee Sheehan?
Yes.
Trustee Stewart?
yes.
The motion passes unanimously, Mr. President.
Thank you, Megan.
The second motion in this area is I submit a motion to approve an ordinance granting a variation to increase the monument sign area from 32 square feet to 59.5 square feet and increase the monument sign height from 6 feet to 10 feet for 704 to 722 East 31st Street, Plaza 31, LLC, case number 21-005.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Trustee Lautner?
Thank you, Mr. President. This area, I think, is an area that probably promotes additional discussion and some concerns. And I think this was the one area that I could see in the text where there was one dissenting vote. It was not unanimous. It was 6-1. And I think I understand some of the questions that were very appropriately raised. I mean, raising the signage from one level to another, much higher, I think is something that we all, according to our codes, has had a lot of thought into it. But as I looked at this area and once again went by and looked at that area personally again, as well as recalling my trips in the past, especially traveling westbound across those tracks. First of all, the current signage really can't be seen. If there's cars parked in those parking spaces, you really can't see what's there. The second thing that I observed is personally, and I've talked to others that have had the same experience of, with all the new things going on in that strip mall, there's a tendency to keep looking. And what's going on there now? Oh, is that place open yet? Oh, what's in there now? And, you know, it's pretty close, as everyone will recognize, to the tracks. And I'm not certain what, if any, there's significant traffic accidents or any reports of that nature, but just sharing personal experiences and observations of that. So the current signage that says 7-Eleven certainly would not be adequate in my mind for helping to promote what is available in that strip mine. So I think in spite of the fact that it is an exception, it is a variance that's been talked through, I think, very thoroughly by our planning and zoning committee. I think it makes a lot of sense to elevate the sign, number one, and number two, have the opportunity of the multiple businesses that are in that strip mall identified, as we, as a precedence, have done at Village Hall, at Village Market. Village Market has the multiple businesses, and we're not talking about anywhere near the height of the Village Hall strip mall. So I think that raising the sign, listing what businesses are in that strip mall, I think will help, significantly help, for the most part, these businesses to get their name out there, have the opportunity to draw in more business, and I think that's what we're all in this for, to support them and help them be successful with their ventures and their sizable investments. So I think that the signage variation that's requested, height-wise, increases the visibility. I think it also improves the safety of the area, and I think it helps promote the businesses that are trying to become successful in that area. So I would here again heartily support this request for granting a variation in this case.
Thank you. Trustee Seidel?
Thank you, Mr. President. I am in support of this as well. We have the CRC committee. We want to support our businesses. I think this is a way to help retain our businesses and bring people into them to shop local. So I am in full support of this.
Thank you. Trustee Council?
Thank you, Mr. President. I tend to disagree with the 10 feet proposition from 6 feet to 10 feet. I do realize that there's a need for visibility of the businesses that are in there currently, but even in the architectural rendering for the 10 feet structure, if cars are parked on either side of that identifying piece, you're still not going to be able to see the entire signage. And I wasn't sure if there was any room for paring it down or possibly shortening it so that it's not 10 feet. My concern is, and I know we've had discussion about setting precedents in years past, but if we have other companies that, or other properties that would want to put a 10-foot sign in their property, would we then have to allow that as well? So I don't really know who can answer that question. And I do usually go along with what the zoning code says. I do pretty much agree with it, but this is like doubling the parameters that are allowed in the zoning code. So, you know, is there any room for like making it smaller signage than what we're currently looking at now?
I'm not.
Yep.
Can I comment? Okay.
Jamie, I guess. Sorry.
So that's okay. Jamie Zara, I'm the architect for this project. So what I can comment on, Trustee Council, is we did actually reduce the sign because it was originally 12 feet, and then staff had asked us to reduce it. So we reduced it slightly, and based on the sizing of the signs of each tenant, the signage company recommends that that is the minimum size to be viewed. So the current sign, the 7-Eleven sign on the site, does not meet code. So even if we replaced it for the like, it still wouldn't meet it. And you can't, as Trustee Lautner said, you cannot see the 7-Eleven sign when there are cars parked next to it. So it's sort of pointless.
Right.
And one issue is that everything is set back, I think it's 70 feet from 31st Street. And as Trustee Lautner said, it's difficult to see what's happening, and we're trying to give the businesses more visibility from the street so that people can see it as they're driving by and they know what's there, and then maybe that'll draw them into the site. So those are the reasons that we had decided to do that, to determine the size. But I think reducing it to meet the code requirement, it would just say 31st Street Plaza, and there would not be any other tenants visible because it just wouldn't happen.
Okay.
And in addition, there's only a few monument signs in the village that address strip malls, like the Village Market and the Meadowcrest practice on 31st and the Grange Road. So the code was written, as I understand it, to kind of encompass the general signage
that we have here, which is usually one business, but since this is multiple business, it's looked at differently. And if you had read, I don't know if you did, but if you had read all of the transcripts, Eric Boyd, who's the chairman, actually mentioned that he was on the committee that designed that code, and that was the intention. So he did reiterate that during the board meeting too.
I did read the transcript. So,
Okay.
Thanks for the clarification. One other question, and I don't know if this is, when a tenant would change in their building and their sign would have to change as well, what happens, the way I'm looking at this is Strive for Fitness takes entire section, like left to right. All the others are a single box. So if another tenant comes in and say Strive for Fitness is taking 2 spaces, would another tenant have to have the allowance to take 2 spaces if their business name were 2 spaces like Strive for Fitness is? Because then you would run,
Sure.
Can I respond?
Oh, please. Yep.
Go ahead. I was going to say, the landlord allocates the signage among his tenants. Sometimes it's based on relative square footage, but it can be based on anything. The village is approving the entire sign. Also, as a point of procedure, there's a motion pending to approve the 10-foot sign, so we can't really consider us voting for a smaller sign until we vote on this motion.
okay.
And thirdly, you asked about precedent. This is a variation proceeding. Precedent doesn't really apply in variations because each applicant must prove a hardship. And so each case is specific to the facts of that case. Other thing I want to point out just tangentially is the only other multi-tenant sign or the major multi-tenant sign in the village, which Trustee Lautner referred to, the village market sign, is classified as an exempt sign because it was installed prior to the adoption of the 2011 zoning code. So whatever is decided in this case will not impact the village market sign because it's on its own anyway.
Okay, thank you, Kathy.
That it, trustee council?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you.
Okay, moving on, trustee Stewart?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with a 10-foot sign. I mean, there's, 9 businesses on that strip? I mean, that's a lot of businesses to try to jam into one sign. And like what one of the trustees said, coming west, you don't know what businesses are in that strip mall at all. And I think the idea is to increase exposure to our businesses, invite more people to come in, and I think it's a good idea to try to increase that size of the sign to have all the business be represented appropriately. So I approve.
Thank you. Trustee Sheehan?
Thank you, Mr. President. I had a couple notes written down. First and foremost, my safety concern is that intersection there does get a lot of traffic. Sometimes when the trains are backed up, the trucks turning on and off of Barnesdale. I really don't know the safety issue of a 10-foot sign sticking out and people paying more attention to what shops are in there rather than the traffic in front of them. So that would be my safety concern. I don't really think that the petitioner shows a hardship for that sign. I think everybody with their smartphones and everything nowadays is pretty much going to know location for what they want to find out. Also, I definitely think that for the most part on 3 sides, it's a residential area. I don't think that sign fits the character of that. So for those reasons that I've stated, I will not support this. Thank you.
Thank you, trustee Sheehan. Question on the sign itself. It's lit, right? It's going to be a lit sign or not?
It'll be lit from the ground. It will not be
So it won't
illuminated.
be intrusive with the lighting either, so it's not going to be a goofy lighting or?
No.
Okay. Any other discussion before we vote? What? Jerry did. Everybody did. Any other further questions? Megan, call the roll.
Trustee Lautner?
Yes.
Trustee Dorr recused himself from the vote. Trustee Seidel?
Yes.
Trustee Sheehan?
No.
Trustee Stewart?
Yes.
The motion passes by a vote of 4-1.
Thank you, Megan. Okay, trustee Lautner, continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. And the third motion is I submitted a motion to approve an ordinance granting a variation to eliminate one required parking lot island and one required shade tree for 704-722 East 31st Street, Plaza 31 LLC, case number 21-0006.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion, trustee Lautner?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think if I picked up the information correctly, I think there's currently 4 islands. Is that, well, clarification. I believe there are 4, and this would be eliminating one of those, which does impact the much-needed parking area. But by the same token, I think it's as I understand it, in support of the ability for the outdoor dining. And I think this is certainly what we had deferred to, that we want to see that expand. So I would support eliminating one of those. And just thinking about, well, if the outdoor dining expands and then we have planted trees and then we have the discussion about taking trees out and things of that nature, I think in anticipation of accommodating that area, I think it makes sense to go ahead now and eliminate the one. So I would support it.
Thank you. Trustee Sidell?
If I can offer one point of clarification, if that's all right. I just want to clarify that there are currently 6 islands within the parking lot. 4 landscape islands will remain at the terminus of each parking row, so in each of the corners of the parking lot. What's being discussed is, or the motion is regarding the center islands and eliminating one for the purpose of outdoor dining, and then the elimination of the shade tree on the adjacent island because of the location of the monument sign. So there would still be 4 fully landscaped islands for this plan.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Maggie. Trustee Sidell?
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with Trustee Lautner. We talked about the outdoor dining, and I am in support of that. And to make that happen, I think we have to make accommodations, and with that reason, I am in favor. So I support this.
Thank you. Trustee Council?
I support it.
Thank you. Trustee Stewart?
This is the only sort of feasible option, correct, Maggie, as far as accommodating the outdoor dining?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, I support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Trustee Sheehan?
I support this, Mr. President.
Okay, Megan, call the roll.
Yes.
Trustee Zoro, you recuse yourself. Trustee Sidell?
Yes.
Trustee Council?
Yes.
Trustee Sheehan?
Yes.
Trustee Stewart?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously, Mr. President.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Trustee Lautner.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, we're on to Public Works again. Trustee Sheehan?
Presentation for stormwater management update and central sewer area separation project review. The purpose is to provide the village board an update on stormwater management, generally the central sewer area separation project in particular, and seeks feedback from the board in 2 areas. General background: the central area bounded by 31st Street on the north, the Grange Road on the west, Homestead on the south, and the IHB, Homestead's the north-south street, how can it, okay, and the IHB Railroad to the east, has experienced significant increased frequency of flooding and damage in recent years. To mitigate the impacts of high-intensity rain events in this area, the village developed plans for the Central Sewer Area Separation Project. The village is partnering with the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District to help fund an innovative stormwater management project along Monroe Avenue. The project, which includes the reconstruction of 3 intersections with permeable pavers, will begin later this summer. Implementation of the Central Sewer Area Separation Project, or some portion thereof, is slated for 2026, or when funding becomes available. The project costs are estimated at more than $10 million. The presentation will provide an overview of the village's current sewer system, how it works, what improvements have been made, and what our future stormwater management plans include. This is informational purposes only. The presentation will be seeking feedback from the board in 2 specific areas. Is there general support from the board to utilize the federal ARPA allocation for the purposes of the Central Sewer Area Separation Project, if eligible? And 2, do we want to progress engineering plans to a shovel-ready position in preparation for the MWRD Stormwater Partnership Program call for projects? So with that, I'll turn it over to Rick and both Marks.
Thank you very much. This presentation this evening is intended to be kind of a catch-all presentation of where we've been, what exists now, and where we are hoping to go. So presenting this evening includes a full slew of experts that have worked hard over the last few weeks and months to pull together information so that we are making sure that you have the information that you need this evening. Starting off with Rick Ratty, our Director of Public Works. We have Mark Volk with Hancock Engineering. We have Mark Lucas with Hancock Engineering. And behind me over here, Larry Noller, our Finance Director. So everyone here helped to work on this presentation, and I really appreciate their assistance. Also, a couple of meetings, we also had President DeCipio there with us. So thank you to the President as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started on the slide presentation. This is the agenda for the presentation. This evening, we're going to identify the concerns. We'll have an overview of the village's sewer system. We're going to talk a bit about some of the system improvements that we've done. We're going to step back just briefly to the work that was done by the Engineering and Capital Projects Committee back in 2011 and 2012. We're also going to talk about the Central Area Storm Sewer Project. This is the project that we've been talking about. This is the project that we've been reaching out to our legislators for funding, and the project that we've been talking to MWRD about. And Hancock Engineering will talk about the plan. We're going to talk about the funding that's necessary in order to accomplish this plan. We're also going to talk about ARPA, which could be used as a resource for stormwater management. And then we will solicit feedback from the board on the 2 questions that Trustee Sheehan laid out with the staff memo, and take any questions. So that's it. That's what's on the agenda. Real quick, right? Okay, let's go. Next slide. So looking at some of the concerns that we have, we are dealing with more rain. Heavy rains are more frequent and can be more intense, and rainfall records are increasing. We have some data that we're going to look at in just a moment. With these intense rain events, the system becomes surcharged, and when the surcharging happens, sewer backups can happen. The central area of our village that Trustee Sheehan talked about earlier with the boundary notes that he mentioned, and yes, it does include Homestead because it has the hook at the end, down on the south portion of the village. And that area is disproportionately impacted due to the depressed area and its location. And any effective strategy must include somewhere for the stormwater to go. So not every village is positioned as we are. We do, as the MWRD has indicated to us in our meetings, that we are fortunate that we do have somewhere for the stormwater to go. And the other concern that we have is an effective strategy has a substantial cost. So we'll be looking at that a little bit more closely tonight. So next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about more rain. Full disclosure, Hancock Engineering provided me with this data. And the MWRD also pointed us in the direction of utilizing this data, which was recently updated. So this is data from the Illinois State Water Survey, Bulletin 75 from 2020. It shows that the number of storms in Illinois producing over 2 inches of rain has nearly doubled over the past century. You can look at the table on the screen and you can see where the more recent years, where those numbers are and the frequency of those higher numbers. The statewide average annual precipitation has increased 11% and temperatures have risen by 1.2 degrees. And for Northeast Illinois, the rainfall data used represents an increase ranging from 10% to 16% in rainfall depending on the duration of the event. And this is the chart of the trend. Okay, next slide, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rick.
So recently, CMAP reached out to us, and they were trying to get us to identify any roadways that were that we would consider flooded during any event. So this map was put together with several mines, just to identify some of the areas that when we do have heavy rain events, that these are the areas that we actually go out, we put barricades at, or we know that there's significant street flooding. As you can see, most of the area highlighted in blue is what we call the central area that we're going to be describing today. There are a few others, but some of them are direct impact of that central area, like the southeast area, Beach, Newberry, down in that area, because it's all going to the same type of sewer system. And then we do still have some on the west side, but as you see, the west side doesn't have as much. There's a couple different reasons. We'll get into that as the slides progress. But this is just a quick overview of where we see our street flooding. But again, this comes from a lot of these impacts that we're having, not just streets. They are some backups. We do have foundation seepage, street flooding, and we also have a lot of rear yard flooding as well. So this is what we call the central area impact. It's a little bit hard to see, but you can see some darker shades really close to that Homestead and Monroe area, which we call our fishbowl. You know, I mean, that's the low-lying area. That's where everything is draining, coming from the west from the Grange Road. We also have the limits of the railroad tracks where you can't get anything. Everything's coming all to this area, and it's all collecting. Like I said, this is hard to see, but this is our major impact area, but then it sprawls out even bigger. When this is surcharged, then everything starts to expand out more. Most of this area, though, because we have the issue with LaGrange Road and we have the hill, this is where we're going to be doing the intersection projects right here. We're going to help try to capture that, but we got this overland flow that's all coming down there, and that's good. Because of that fishbowl, that's where everything is draining, and that's why we have a lot of the flooding there, because our system is just surcharged. It just has nowhere for that water to go.
So just a couple of notes with that. There's a couple of issues at play here. This is the low-lying area of the village. So in the lowest areas is where you're going to see the water reaching its level. It's closer to the water table, so it's going to fill up sooner. And then also it's going to have the overland shedding of the water from the higher levels coming down. So just a lot going on when you have the depressed area at the central district.
Yeah, and let me just, when the sewers surcharge, obviously they're going to come up from the lowest grates first, and since this is topographically the lowest area of the village, so it will come up there first and stay there the longest and be the deepest.
It's the first to come up and the last to recede. As we move on, this is just a quick overview of our current system as it stands right now. The easy way to explain it is that anything west of LaGrange Road all drains west. Anything east of LaGrange Road is all going to drain east, okay? Minus stormwater right now. This is our combination sewer system as a general. So purple is our pink, that's our combination, so which is most of our community. Green is just separate sanitary, which we have two small areas. We have the Sherwood Village area, and then we have north of 26th up here. Those are because we have two lift stations, so those lift stations only take sanitary sewage. And then those have separate storms that were built when those subdivisions were built that already outflow to the creek as well. Red, these are current separated storm sewers or original storm sewers as part of the build-outs of some of those subdivisions, but those are all shedding towards the creek. Your dark green is our There's one missing. I just couldn't get it on the map, and then we don't have it in here. But these are our MWRD interceptor lines, which they follow along the creek line. We got a couple that dump in over on the west side behind Naz, and then our major one is over here at 31st Street, right at the Salt Creek Bridge. So pretty easy to understand how our system really flows. It's because of geography, everything is just going west or east. These are our sort of what we call our drainage districts. As stated, the purple area, again, west, there's your LaGrange Road cutoff, everything going to the west, going towards the creek. In those areas where those interceptor lines are, we dump into either the interceptor or the deep tunnels are back there that we can dump into, or we have our CSOs, which is our combined sewer overflows that would dump into the creek during those high flow conditions. If you go to the east side, the blue, that's what we're talking about with the central area. For our main combination system, everything goes together. Even this map shows the stormwater drainage is going this way, but our combination system, everything still drains to this side and goes down 31st Street. So this whole area in the combination, anything that hasn't been separated, all will come to this area and go down this street, 31st Street sewer. So that's where, if you look at, you have two major parts of our community that are going into one major trunk line or collector line that's down 31st Street. So in 2006, there were two big projects that were identified to help with some flooding issues. One was the Woodlawn outfall sewer, which is right down Woodlawn right here, through the Nazareth baseball field, behind the homes along Edgewood that go to the creek. That was an original 24-inch double brick wall sewer that was replaced to put a 54-inch down there. All the side streets came in there. So it all went behind the Nazareth area, bigger size. It also was increased to help convey to convey more water into the deep tunnel connection, and also there was a bigger outfall to the creek that was installed to help shed water faster into the Salt Creek. That's why our west side in the sewers over here are deeper. I think you guys would agree too. That's why you don't have as much impact on this side compared to everywhere else, but you also have bigger pipe that are helping get that water to the creek or to the deep tunnel system or the MWRD portion. So this is just the image that what we did. Again, that was originally a 24-inch line coming down here where everything connected, went up to 54, went to the deep tunnel over here. I wish these pointers would work on LED TVs, but they don't. So this is where everything goes and then sheds into the deep tunnel, and then you also have the CSO, which is the combined sewer overflow that goes into the Salt Creek over there. So that was project number one. The second project was probably our larger project, but that was our stormwater separation program that we did, which we tried to convey a lot of the stormwater on the east side of town, east and center, north of 31st Street, because they were the closest to the creeks. So we went down the east-west streets where we were able to capture the 4 storm sewers at each intersection. Instead of going mid-block where there's only usually 2, it was a bigger bang for our buck to go east-west. You'll see that in the map here in a minute. We also put in 2 new outfalls, one on Forest Road and one at Morgan, 48-inch, that is conveying all that storm water to the creek, which really, really helped that area tremendously. And it also takes water off of that 31st Street main, which it did a lot to do that, but we're still needing some more improvements to help even that center area. So this map is, anything in the shaded blue area is stuff that was put in the 2006 project. There were already a couple outfalls that were there, like the one on Kemen was there. We just added more into there. This is your new Morgan Avenue outfall that was installed, and here's all your east-west streets, like I stated, where everything's going in that main trunk line. We were able to capture all those intersections, which was 4 basins per intersection versus 2 if you went up down the blocks. And then this is the other area on the west side of the tracks, and we were able to convey all this water up into the new Forest Road sewer that was put in as well. Again, big projects, took a lot of stormwater off of the combination system. It did help out tremendously, especially the people in those areas, to help with just backups in basements and things like that. That really did help a lot. You guys got anything? Instead of me just up here talking?
No, that's a good overview. Yeah, that's how the system works. And like you said, I think it has greatly helped mitigate a lot of that storm flooding that used to happen.
I'm just going to do a real quick overview on MWRD, just how everything works. Mark Lucas, you may jump in here if I misspeak on something, but I'm going to try to do my best how it all works here. So, you know, all of our sewage, all of our combined sewage goes into what they call interceptor lines. The interceptor lines are the main trunk lines that convey dry weather flow, okay, dry weather flow to the Stickney plant, and that's where the sewage gets treated, and all that water gets relayed back into the waterways, and then all of the sludge and everything gets, we don't need to go into that part of it, okay? What happens is that once we get into a wet weather scenario, and those interceptors don't just take our stuff, they take from other communities all leading, you know, upstream of that. So Brookfield dumps into some areas, other town like Westchester probably dumps in, I would imagine, upstream of there too. So you have everybody, all these villages trying to all get into this interceptor, but when we're all in combination, you have all that rainwater that's getting in there, they just can't accept it that fast. So here comes the deep tunnel, the TARP system. The Tunnel and Reservoir Project is how it was classified as one of the biggest public works project ever that was ever constructed in the country. And the big reason why it was built was, one, we needed some stormwater relief in the Cook County area and in this region. Number two, we were having a lot of issues with them reversing the river flows and going back into Lake Michigan, which was polluting our drinking water, which is where we all come from. So this effort has really paid off. Now, it's not complete yet, but we all know that the deep tunnels were built way back when, a few years back. But what they're still trying to do is get a couple reservoirs online. The McCook Reservoir, there's one. There's another one that's going to be put online, right? Another second one. Down in Thornton. That one exists. So there's a couple that are already online, which these are big reservoirs, and they hold lots of billions of gallons of water. And you would figure that even with these reservoirs coming online that, oh, wow, we should have relief. Still not enough, okay? But it has been a big initiative, because otherwise we would be even worse condition than we are now. So the reason why I wanted to bring this up is just to go over the capacities. I mean, when the TARP is at a full capacity, when the reservoirs even go online, you're looking at 20.55 billion gallons of water that'll hold. That's a lot of water. That's a lot of rainwater. The tunnels are 2.3 alone, and then there's the reservoirs at 18.25. So what happens is that after a rain event, these reservoirs are filled. They wait until the treatment plant is back to capacity. They repump those out back to the head of their wastewater plant. That gets cleaned before it gets released back into the waterways.
One quick thing I just want to add. So yeah, your system is connected to TARP right now, 31st Street and all those other ones. So you could imagine if that wasn't in place, what the flooding would have been with these recent storms. It would be even worse. So yeah, projects are happening to help reduce the flooding, but unfortunately the rainfall, the intensities keep increasing, and we just need more and more.
So related to the MWRD slide that we were just looking at, one of the comments that I have heard a couple of times from residents is, one of the options we should be considering is just, why don't we build another sewer line and take it south and connect into the TARP, into the deep tunnel? So when we had one of our conversations with the MWRD recently, we asked the representative that we've been meeting with, can we build a sewer system, a combined sewer system, to take it down south, kind of at the LaGrange Park border with LaGrange, and connect directly into the system? And to which the MWRD said that's not an option for us. And so they were quick to respond. And so maybe Hancock Engineering can help me with this a little bit. So we asked, well, why isn't that an option? A couple of the reasons that they stated is, number one, the MWRD is not going to like another system coming online that includes all of this additional stormwater, the amount of energy that it takes to process this stormwater along with the sewage in the system is it's just too much. There's too much energy to lift all of that and take it into the system. And secondly, they stated that your community has somewhere for the stormwater to go. And this is the system that we're looking at, the design that we're looking at is really the best way to go, is to separate it out, keep the stormwater separate from the combined effort into providing some relief to the community. I don't know if Hancock had anything to add to that? Okay,
Yeah.
so if you get the question asked to you, can't we just build a system down to the tarp? The answer from the MWRD is no. They won't let us do that.
Plus, we also, it's more expensive too.
It is. I think the estimate came back at 15 to 20, and that's 15 million just to build it before it gets into the neighborhoods. But again, that was something that was identified in the study that we're going to be talking about in a minute. That was an option that was considered, but we've asked, and we asked several different ways, and they say no, no, no. So anyway, we're going to take a step back in time and look at that study from 2012 with the next slide. So we've talked a lot about this project that we're looking at, the central area storm sewer, and that project really comes from a report that the Engineering and Capital Projects Committee did back in 2011 and 2012. So they worked with Hancock Engineering and staff and members of the board to look at really all of the impacts of the rain events and come up with some recommendations. And in order to prioritize the different types of options that the village should consider, they prioritize the impacts of flooding. Identifying sewer backups is kind of the worst thing that can happen because there's public health issues with that. Significant street flooding can impact property access and transportation, rear yard flooding impacting structures, and then rear yard flooding impact use, and then nuisance rear yard flooding. So this is kind of the prioritization of impacts related to heavy rain events. So that was kind of an important foundation that group set up in order to look at the options. So we can move on to the next slide. So that's out of that study came a number of recommendations, and here they are listed. This recommendation document is available at the village's website, and you can take a look. Some of the recommendations were a separate storm sewer without detention. This was estimated at around $7 million. This is the basis for the project that we are looking at today and that we've been building on since that time. They also recommended disconnection of downspouts. We'll talk about that in a little bit. A backflow prevention or a sewer backup prevention program. We had this program in place before this study, but eventually it was brought back into play, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Potentially help fund residential rain gardens, which we did do with the disconnection of downspout program, and a response plan that really prepared staff to be able to respond to these heavy rain events, which included the barricades and staff response. Some of the things that we did not select or did not prioritize are just pretty expensive storm sewer systems. We had one at $44 million, $23 million. We looked at street drainage restrictors, which were really unpredictable and just very tough to engineer and implement, even though they're kind of simple in their design. There was also isolated detention, micro ponds. These would be micro ponds or underground. The recommendation was a minimum of 2 lots at 28 locations. But any type of isolated detention certainly is an option as we look to consider the separate stormwater program into the future. We can, that's always an option, and certainly what we're looking at will provide for some underground detention. And next slide. So these are some of the related improvements that we have put into place in recent years. We have a ordinance, a stormwater ordinance that requires stormwater management plan, compensatory storage with any new impervious surface area over 250 square feet. Our new zoning code put a couple of new requirements into place: lot coverage and impervious surface coverage limits. We have, as mentioned earlier, a sewer backup prevention program, and since it was reintroduced in 2015, the program has provided assistance to 85 homes, about $225,000 and counting, 71 check valves, and 14 overhead sewers and counting. In 2014, the MWRD placed new rules into place. Prior to 2014, no stormwater detention was required in combined areas. When there was development after 2014, these requirements became much more robust in towns like ours with combined systems. So it is now required. So you have to be providing for compensatory storage. We also implemented a downspout disconnection program in 2014 and finished in 2019. It was one of the 8 mitigation strategies, and the data show that 1,900 homes were directly connected. And by the time that we were done, we counted it up, and there were actually 1,800 homes that were disconnected, freeing up about 12% of the combined sewer system and reducing the potential of sewer backups into the basement of homes. And then the last item on this list, and coming soon, is the green intersections at Monroe. And with that, I'll turn it over to one of the marks.
So the green infrastructure program is a cost share program that the village entered in with the MWRD. It's one of the programs they fund, helping to remove water from the combined sewer is the main goal, so that we can reduce the amount of water that's treated downstream, but also help reduce some of the runoff impacts that are there. The village selected to use a green intersection, store some of the runoff that we currently have, specifically on Monroe, at Community, Robin Hood, and Sherwood, where we're going to be removing about 78,000 gallons of water that currently get into the combined sewer system, and also add to some of the flooding that we see in that central business area now, or central sewer area. Now, in and of itself, 79,000 gallons doesn't cure the problem, but it's trying to remove some of that upstream flow that is moves its way down to Monroe and Homestead. That's going to be beneficial, not in and of itself, but as all these elements are put together. The storage of it is rather simple. Excavate out the intersections. We'll be storing water inside the stone aggregate base. It's about 2.5 feet deep of storage in there. That water is a combination of retained. It'll be infiltrated into the soils and detained. There is still an underdrain in there, so that the water will be getting into the sewer system at a much slower rate than what it does now. To give you an idea for the direct tributary area of those intersections, it's a little under 1.5 inches of runoff, rainwater, that's removed from the system just on those 3 intersections. So that is helpful. In a lot of our storm sewers that we've had recently, May of last year, and most recently in June, those are very short, high-intensity rainfall events. And being out there, you can see the water cascading from the Grange Road and continuing and filling each of the intersections and mid-block basins, and it continues to move down the road to the next lowest spot. We looked at the duration of what that flooding is on the street, and we're trying to come up with strategies to reduce that volume as much as possible, But in the end, I still think that when we move through the rest of the plan, there has to be an outlet for this runoff, separate from the combined sewer system that we have. There's not really a good way to mitigate that flow, and getting it to the creek is expensive in this specific location because we have to pump it to get to the creek. We don't have a gravity outlet that can make it to the creek at that point. So you can go over that.
All right. The overall central sewer area separation program, as was mentioned before, the whole concept is to construct separate storm sewers to remove flow from the combined system. Nobody constructs combined sewers anymore just because, high rain events and you flood basements. So we're concentrating, as we saw in those maps before, area south of 31st, west of the tracks, east of LaGrange Road, and approximately Oak Avenue on the south. That's the area that was flooding severely. Goals and benefits. As we said, the storm sewer will convey storm water in its own network to Salt Creek. We will need to pump it because of utility conflicts and grade conflicts. But this will reduce the water in the village's combined system, which will provide relief from basement backups. It will help reduce street flooding, which is always a concern for emergency vehicles, which are especially needed at that time. Help reduce overland flooding and the depth of the flooding, which is getting worse, as was mentioned, with increasing rainfall events. Reduced street flooding will have reduced the chance of damaging structures, homes and garages, things like that, and will also help reduce damage to vehicles which may enter standing water. Although we know it's known, don't drive in water that you can, because you're going to stall out if it's too deep. So the basic concept will be to construct large diameter gravity sewers in that area south of Jackson, which will drain to a underground vault, which will incorporate a submersible pumps, which will pump the water at a controlled rate through a force main north, eventually into Salt Creek, up Homestead, up Barnesdale. And the last section of the force main will utilize an existing 24-inch sewer. It's currently a gravity sewer which flows to Salt Creek. The village has the permit to do that. We're going to convert that into a force main. We're going to line the sewer, rehabilitate it, and utilize that existing infrastructure as part of this plan. And that shows the overall map of the project. And as we get into each phase, we'll have a closer up view of each phase of the project. But that's the overall concept, basically from Oak all the way north to the creek. So this project, it can be constructed all at once, obviously, or it can be constructed in phases because of funding constrictions. Phased construction, there is a definite sequence on how we want to build it. Obviously, one thing has to come before the other. So we're going to review that. Phase one was basically to construct the heart of the system, which would be the underground box culvert, underground storage, probably on Jackson Avenue, which would extend between Barnesdale and Homestead. This will incorporate the previously mentioned pump station. We would have a backup generator near the public works to power that should the ComEd electric fail, which happens unfortunately quite often during storms like that. And then we would install a force main from that location to a temporary connection at 31st Street for that, into the sewer, the 48-inch sewer which flows east. And the pumps will be sized so as not to overtax that 31st Street sewer during this initial phase. So this is the part that needs to be constructed first, obviously, because it incorporates the pumps.
Mark, I want to make a quick comment here.
Sure.
As you can see on the slide where it says make a temporary connection at Homestead and 31st Street, that 31st Street is again one of our main trunk line, is our main trunk line that takes that whole everything east of the Grange Road. So with that being said, that's where everything goes to anyways. And by putting a temporary connection in there, we're going to be limited on what we can pump in there because, again, we don't want to create a problem somewhere else, but it is going to provide some sort of relief in that area, but it's not going to be as much as if we were to pump directly to the creek. So ideally, doing this all in one or doing at least a couple of the first phases, we would eliminate that temporary connection and it would just go directly to the creek if we were able to move forward and do a few of those. If we were, if funding wasn't there, this is an option to do that would still provide some relief, but it's not going to be like this, what it would be if we were able to do the whole entire project and get that water to the creek. I hope you guys understand, where.
Yeah, I mean, I just had one question. So phase one, you're saying we'll see a little bit of a change, a little bit of an improvement of the drainage, but the more phases we go on, the more we're going to get. So if we can do more at one time, it's more appropriate. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you'll see as we move on, when you see the next phase, I think it'll all come into play. Okay. But I just wanted to reiterate that temporary connection and why that would be temporary. If we decide, if we need to do the phased approach, this would have to be put in, so we would be able to start utilizing some part of the system until we can get that force main north of 31st Street done, where then we can be pumping directly to the creek. We'd be able to pump it at a higher velocity and more gallons per minute. Okay. So this would just be a temporary if we decide, that the phased approach is how we're going to tackle it.
Right, and then phase two, we would install 48-inch storm sewer from Jackson to Monroe, 24-inch sewer extensions on Monroe, east and west, to Barnesdale and Forest, to help to begin collecting that stormwater in those low-lying areas. And then this would be obviously, an increase in benefit over phase one, and you'd start to see some better mitigating effects. And we could also incorporate green infrastructure, where feasible or where practical. The next phase, phase three, consists of installing the force main from 31st all the way up to a connection north of 26th with that previously mentioned 24-inch gravity sewer, which will be lined and go to the creek. We would also have to do some reworking of the storm sewers in the vicinity of those businesses up there, because they rely on that 24-inch gravity sewer. Since we're converting that to a force main, we now have to kind of redo some of their storm system and install a small lift station to pump that into the force main. So they'll be part of the system too. And then phase four, the last section would be to extend the 48-inch sewer on Homestead from Monroe down to Oak, and then include connection of all the drainage structures in the street. Extend 24-inch sewers on Harding and Oak from Barnesdale to Forest to collect additional runoff from the intersections. And then we could even possibly extend sewers, up Barnesdale and Forest to collect additional mid-block drainage. And I mean, there's various configurations, but this is where you would see the full extent of the benefits of the project.
So we're at 10 million.
Pardon?
We're at 10 million.
Yes, all that would be that. Yep, 10 million.
And there's your slide.
Well, maybe 11 million, sorry.
So this slide provides a snapshot of the total cost of the project. This is an estimated cost. There are all the phases there. The preference would be, from a staff perspective, is to get as much of it done as possible to get the greatest benefit to the area if funding is available. And at least phases 1 through 3, if possible, which is about $7 million. But to get the full benefit of the system and do the construction all continuously rather than tie into 31st and then undo that just to build an extension soon after that and not have to recalibrate the engineering. Ideally, it would be great to be able to provide relief and get all 4 phases done. If not that, then 3. So the sources of funding that are available to the village are we can borrow, and we'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. We can borrow up to $5 million. There is the America Recovery Act. And with that, our allocation is about $1.8 million. We are working, President DeCipio and I have been reaching out to our legislators requesting that they consider this project for funding. So we've been working with our legislators for any opportunities. We have been told that there may be capital funding opportunities coming up soon in the fall. So we're kind of keeping a pulse on that. There's also an MWRD program where we can seek funding. But ideally, the type of funding that we would be looking at are these amounts, and certainly we would not want to borrow any more than we have to. Because the more that we borrow, the borrowing would either be in an alternate revenue bond or it would be in a state revolving loan. We have to pay that from a source, and that would be the sewer fund. And the more tax the sewer fund is, the less money that we have available to do other improvements to our combined sewer. So we can go on to the next slide.
Just a quick question. If we can go back to the previous slide? Thank you. The total cost is 10 million, and the total that we're looking for is 11.8, so almost 2 million more than what we need. Because overrun?
Yes, this is a very preliminary estimate. We can certainly, it's very early. These are the numbers that we have now. We are requesting $5 million from the state or the MWRD. That's what we're looking for. And we don't know exactly. We know what our allocation is from the Recovery Act. We don't know that for absolutely certain. And we don't want to borrow any more than we have to. So it's really, I think in order to position us well, we need to be right around that mark to be able to position us to complete the project. We're very preliminary. We don't have any design done, which we'll talk about next. And I appreciate it's a good question, but the project hasn't been designed, and we don't know what's underneath the ground on any of these streets. Yeah, go ahead.
Just want to add real quick that that 10 million does include engineering, design, construction inspection. So just in case you were wondering.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all in.
It does not.
Does not.
It does not.
Everything,
all in.
yes.
Does.
Yes, it
Okay.
does.
That's all in.
Can I just ask, does this project, in order to get money from MWRD or the state, does it need to be shovel-ready, so it has to be totally designed?
It needs to be designed to a certain point they would consider shovel-ready, yes. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Yeah, that's a great question. But right now, the design of it is the drawing that we have. That's as far as the design. It's in a concept.
But that's not enough.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So we'll move on to the next slide. There's a question.
Yeah,
Trustee Lautner?
regarding sources of funding. Is there any consideration for going back to Indiana Harbor Belt? I know that the railroad's been in there for a long time, but they're a contributing factor to some of this. in that it holds the water in that area. Has that ever been considered or discussed as a possibility of their involvement in credence and relief from them?
I've certainly discussed a number of topics with the IHB over the years. Funding to support any types of projects has not been one of the topics discussed, but I would turn it over to Hancock to see if they've had any experience.
So one of the issues is Indiana Harbor Belt is the most readily observable increase in height. But actually, as we move towards Kemen, the road from Homestead, it's actually increasing in elevation as we get towards Kemen. You know, you don't see it because of the Indiana Harbor Belt there. But by the time you're there, it's 1.5 to 2 foot lower than the grades along Kemen. So we would still have, this is the low area. It's really a geographic low area unto itself, regardless if the Indiana Harbor Belt is at that location. So we've had this issue in other communities that have railroads going through there, and really, they're federally regulated entities. Kind of the favor is always on their side. I think when you've talked to your state and federal legislatures, I mean, they're recognizing the issue. They're trying to come up with funding for that. I think those are the ways they can do it. I don't know if the railroad in and of itself would participate in any of those costs.
Thank you. Yes, thought. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Again, just to reiterate the question posed by President DeCipio, just a little bit of background information. We still have a note. We still have an outstanding loan that is an alternate revenue bond loan that gets paid out of the sewer fund. It comes due in December 2025. So we're currently paying that, and that particular payment puts a lot of strain on the sewer fund to make those payments. And because of that, it limits the amount of money that we can utilize, and that was for the 2006 improvements, right? So when that fund is heavily dependent upon to support these projects, when we have significant improvements left to do in our combined system, there needs to be funding to address those issues. So when we do new road construction, we like to go, when we rip up the road, we want to make sure that there's sewer point repairs that are done. We want to make sure that we're able to do at least $400,000 in sewer lining. We still have a ton of combined sewers out there that we want to do. So yes, the numbers don't match, but our goal is, if possible, to not borrow as much. Because when we do, there's less money to take care of all the other combined infrastructure throughout the town. And we still have to take care of that. We still have to take care of the other sewer system. So, and that's important too. So that's why that number looks bigger than this number. We know we can borrow $5 million, but do we want to? We still have other obligations. But I love the question, and thank you. So we'll move on to the next slide. The next slide, I'm going to get a little bit of help from Larry. We haven't heard from Larry yet tonight, so it's time. So funding the project, I kind of put it all out there on this slide. So Larry did reach out to Baird Financial, and they talked about capacity. And we have a couple of options. The alternate revenue bonds, that's one option that we can take. With the alternate revenue bonds, we really need to know what we want to borrow. So this is one way to borrow. The process is the benefits. It's driven by the village. It's a shorter timeline. We also have the Illinois Revolving Loan Program. That's an option for us to consider to borrow. The amount is flexible. So if we thought we wanted to borrow $5 million and then we found out we only needed to borrow $2 million, it's much more flexible, so we can reduce that amount. It's very grant-like. It has a longer timeline in terms of putting in an application, finding out whether you're selected, and then if you're not selected, there's still a second go at it for their consideration. But one of the things that we do like about it is that if the village board supports the idea of using our ARPA funds for this project, the Illinois Revolving Loan Program, the requirements for that loan echo the ARPA requirements, or rather ARPA echoes these requirements. And so the other funding support that we're looking at is the state of Illinois and the MWRD. So this gets back to Trustee Zora's question earlier. There is a Stormwater Partnership program that is available. It opens up in the wintertime, and I think that it closes in March. And so the project should be shovel-ready, and it requires advanced expenditures and engineering. These expenditures that, as Mark mentioned earlier, are included in that total cost, but we would have to pull those out and pay them up front, and we don't have that budgeted. But if we want to make it shovel-ready, you know, that's what we're seeking from the board this evening. Is there any support to get this project shovel-ready to be able to put in for that program, which would be due in March? And so with the MWRD, the timing is somewhat certain. It takes a long time. It takes about a year. Funding is very competitive, but we believe we have a very good project. And then the work that President DeCipio is doing with the state of Illinois and looking for funding that may become available through the legislature, where they are going to be separating out a portion of their share of the ARPA for regional projects or community support. And there may be other capital funding available as well. This type of funding, while it sounds good, we've been working really hard. President DeCipio's been working really hard. The timing in the funding is really uncertain, right? There's no solid information. Larry, is there anything that you want to talk about on the left side of the slide? Anything that I missed?
I think you hit it all.
Anything you want to mention about Baird Financial and working with the consultants?
No, they provided a complete analysis of what we could do with the sewer fund, given our current rate structure right now. And we can borrow at least the $5 million that we're talking about based on what we have coming into the sewer fund right now.
Okay, thank you. So next slide. Oh, we're back to Larry. We're getting close to the end, though. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Larry, back to you.
Thank you. So you may have heard of this. This is one of the acts that Congress passed earlier this year in response to the pandemic. If you can put the next slide up. It's a very large COVID relief package, $1.9 trillion in economic stimulus and COVID-19 relief. Of that, $65.1 billion was slated for municipalities, $45.57 billion to metropolitan municipalities. These are larger municipalities, over 50,000, or central cities, and they receive their money based on a formula using the CDBG grant formula. There's also $19.53 billion to municipalities with populations less than 50,000, similar to the village. These are called non-entitlement unit cities. And we are slated to receive just under $1.8 million from the ARPA. Next slide, please. Some of the eligible uses for ARPA include supporting public health expenditures, addressing the negative income or economic impacts caused by the pandemic. It can be used to replace lost public sector revenue. It can also be used to provide premium pay for essential workers. And homing in on what we were talking about tonight, it can also be used to invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. As many federal grant programs, there's quite a bit of requirements that come along with the funding. This funding for the non-entitlement units that include us, we need to request our funds from the state. That's actually talked about later on the agenda tonight. We'll be talking about doing that. Part of that requires the village to agree to civil rights assurances, making sure that we're complying with all those federal requirements. There's several other terms and conditions. There'll be a agreement that we need to sign that's on the agenda tonight also. The ARPA funds must be obligated by December 31st, 2024. So we do have some time to make the decision on how we're going to spend that money. It's not something that has to be done immediately. We can accept the funds and then decide what kind of project we want to do. There's going to be annual reporting for those funds. And the way that those funds are going to be distributed is that we receive half of the money now and then one half in about 1 year. And then I'll turn it back to Julia.
Thank you, Larry. So this slide really points us to the two questions for which staff is seeking feedback from the village board. So there are a couple of points here. One of them is whether or not there is general support or some feedback from the board about whether or not we want to utilize the ARPA allocation for the purposes of this particular project. This is a project I think that we've been working on for a long time. It's been identified as a goal since 2011. It certainly is slated to provide a lot of benefit to a lot of homes and some businesses in the community. And one of the reasons why we really want to apply for the MWRD grant and reach out to the state for potential funding is because there is funding available now. We've been watching for funding opportunities for a long time and waiting for something to happen. And as President DeCipio and I were meeting with a couple of our legislators, some of the feedback we're hearing is, it's a good time to ask for necessary funding for some critical infrastructure projects. Now is a good time. So we don't want that opportunity to pass us up when we're getting that kind of feedback, because we've had these meetings for a long time. I can't remember receiving that information before, that there's, funding, potentially capital funding available, and it's a good time. So it just feels like a good time to dive in and try and get this project done. So the two questions that we have is whether or not we want some feedback on the use of ARPA funds for this particular project. And the second question is, do we want to progress engineering plans to a shovel-ready position in preparation for the MWRD Stormwater Partnership Program call for projects, which would be due in March. And if there is some support for that, we could bring that back to the board. So the two questions, I can see it on all of you, the two questions that you're having is where would the money come from and how much money are we talking to get it shovel-ready? So Hancock Engineering has been working for a couple of weeks on this estimate, and the estimate for engineering is about $480,000 to get this project shovel-ready. And Hancock Engineering can talk a little bit more about that. That would be something we would bring back to the board in the form of an engineering agreement. Certainly, we don't have to do this project. This is a program that is available, and this would prepare us for that project, for that application process. If that's something we want to do, the engineering that we do will never go away. This is a good project, and any progress that we make will certainly always be there for us. And certainly, Hancock Engineering can answer any questions related to that. And that money would have to come from reserves. And so then the question I'm sure you're wondering is, would we be able to sustain that kind of a payment from the reserves? And we could. We also did talk to the budget director for Speaker Welch's office, and they are working with the governor's office on developing this ARPA kind of program that they plan to introduce legislation in the fall for these community projects. And one of the things they are looking at is that if we spend any money, is there an opportunity to reach back and help fund for any costs that we may have incurred to get it shovel ready? So, that's a consideration that we have. I can't know whether or not, you know, we can pay ourselves back through funding opportunities in the future, but it's something that we're thinking about. And then the other question is, you know, the feedback from the board on the ARPA allocation. So I am happy to take any of those questions one at a time, or take any questions from the board about the presentation.
Why don't we take them one at a time?
Sounds good.
How's that?
Good.
Okay. Let's start with Trustee Lautner.
My stomach is turning looking at all of this. I want to first of all say that, and thank and commend staff for what I consider a terrific piece of work. It's obvious that a heck of a lot of work and effort went into this. I know we've talked about it in the past, about the importance of it and the impact that our residents are experiencing. And I think bringing all this together to represent where we have been, where we are, where we want to go, and how we might get there, like I said, is a terrific piece of work. So I thank everyone and your staff and commend you for putting this together for us. As far as attempting to answer the questions, I don't know if it's a question I can answer directly. I certainly can say that, in my mind, that the level of importance of this in the village certainly dictates what's going on here, and that we need to address this. And as one of our residents said this evening, the frustration of 2026 seems too long. I mean, I don't know if we physically can get there any quicker than that, but starting on the path, well, it's already started, but continuing on the path, I think makes all the sense. I don't know if I can sit here right now and say, yes, all of ARPA allocation needs to go there. I would want to see what are other significant impacts, but certainly a large part, I don't think say major, but a large part of that ARPA allocation, I think certainly would be justified. Maybe all of it, I don't know, but I would want to see what are the other things that would be impacted by that. Relative to the second question, I think in order to get ourselves into a position to be shovel ready, to potentially be able to receive the awards, I think is certainly expense well submitted, well justified. So I would support both of those in that manner. But terrific piece of work. Thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you, Trustee Lautner. Let's stick with the first question and get that one taken care of first. So Trustee Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also want to echo Trustee Lautner's sentiments on the amount of work and effort that is taken to put all of this together. This is a lot of information, but I think that as far as the ARPA funds go, I know you went. Can you go back a couple of slides to the one right before that? Sorry, two more up. Yeah, that one there. I think this is priority number one for us, this flooding issue. And, it's hard to say if all of the funds need to go towards it, because I think a lot of those other sort of bullet points are super important as well. I guess, when we talk about these phases, when we talk about ARPA, that could almost cover phase one, right? How does that, what's the timeline on these phases, I guess? Like, if we were to get funding from the state and use most of all of the ARPA funds, how much time are we talking if we want to go through stages 1 through 3, for example?
Well, upon authorization of engineering, it would probably take about 6 months, at least 6 months, to get the plans prepared. And then that's the starting point.
That's
then
the shovel ready.
The shovel ready,
Okay.
But then, that's just for review by the MWRD for that one grant. It still has to go through other permit processes and things like that.
And it would also depend on the source of money for, you know, whether it's a grant through the state, through DCEO, they have their requirements. The MWRD has different requirements. Revolving loan has different requirements. So depending on the source of funding that you wind up with, kind of dictates kind of the speed, because there are reviewed by those agencies, but also how the final, it has to be packaged at the end. So there's a little bit of the gray where we can't really give you a direct answer on that yet.
And Julia, the state funding is probably the one with the most, the least amount of requirements, I guess is what I got from.
If the legislature develops a bill that provides for additional ARPA funds for either regional or community projects, I imagine that the ARPA stipulations will be consistent with what the federal what the feds require or the U.S. Treasury requires.
Definitely.
I'm guessing that would be the case. But, you know, we talked a lot. I appreciate the question. We talked a lot about timelines. You know, the soonest we could probably get started would be 2023. It is a substantial project. This is huge. And probably, you know, if all funding was available, it would probably take a full year. There's potential to get it completed in a full season, right?
For like the whole complete project? Yeah,
it would take a full season. So the soonest we could possibly get it done is 2023.
Gotcha.
It's just a substantial project, and it requires sophisticated engineering.
Okay.
And so there's a lot going on there.
Great. I'll stick to question one, and definitely in support of allocating those funds towards this effort. And then I know you mentioned the green intersections and how much that seems to have a really significant impact as well, right? And that's happening this year.
Correct. That'll happen this year. The plans are into the MWRD for review right now. They have to approve them, but they'll have an impact. Again, it's kind of a collective. If you looked at the volume of water that was out there at the end of June, it exceeded 79,000 gallons greatly. I mean, it's a big volume, but it's trying to mitigate it as we go along.
And you said there were other opportunities potentially to have that those impervious intersections. Like
certainly along the route, as we construct it, we would look at that as a component of that system, and we've kind of built that into the estimate.
Sure. I support. Sorry for so long.
Thank you, Trustee Stewart. Trustee Zora?
I have a lot of questions. So I'll start with the ARPA money. I definitely think we should request this and it should be allocated to this. But I did want to go back to the intersections, as Trustee Stewart just mentioned. These 3 intersections that were selected, those are the lowest, or they're just in that whole fishbowl to stop? It's just to stop the water flow to keep getting to the lowest point.
They're upstream of the lowest point. They're kind of intercept that water before it gets to that area.
Okay. And that makes sense. That's the best effort for that use, for those intersections. Would another step be to get to the lowest points with that intersection?
Our concern with putting them in the lowest points is that when you construct the storm sewer, you would be ripping all that work out to put this new storm sewer in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a upstream phase that you would want to develop. You know, if you had everything in order and all funding in, this would be something you would do after that to help supplement it. But we really don't want to spend the money on putting these right at that low spot. We're gonna tear it out.
I understand that, but those are the people that are most affected right now. I mean, those are the people that I keep hearing from that are in that area, that low lying area.
We're still taking flow that is going to that area. That's the biggest part. We are taking that away from getting to that area beforehand.
Okay. Let's see. Some of the questions have been answered, so sorry. So with the phasing of all these projects, I understand that if we don't have the money, we'd have to separate the phasing. But in my experience, the phasing is exponentially more than doing this all at one time. So I'm also an advocate for figuring out how to do this. And if we have to borrow the $5 million, I think that we should do it because I think it could be so much more if we do this phase and it's going to take more years and then it might not even be feasible to finish this. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks about that, but that's just my opinion. I think that was it for right now, and then I'll wait for the next portion. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Zora. Trustee Council?
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe that the ARPA funds should be used to the greatest extent to helping out with this flooding remediation project. I guess my question to Mark would be, well, to either Mark, would be, if we decided to do it in phases, would it make more sense to you to do phase 4 as opposed to another phase, simply because it seems like that phase would have a better benefit to more residents, or are we going to gain more benefit by doing other phases?
Well, phase 1 you have to build first because that's the pump. Phase 2 would be the next logical one because it's the sewers just to the south and it's collecting more water. Phase 4 would almost has to be last because when you collect that much water, now you need to pump it somewhere without being restricted. So phase 3 really needs to come next because you need an outlet for all this water that we're collecting, if that makes sense.
It does, but I have to piggyback on what Trustee Zora said. The residents seem to always get, bombarded with water. I mean, water, 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 and that's the majority of the comments that I get from residents, as well as when are we as a village going to do something about their flooding issues and to help alleviate that. And I have a lot of doubt that we can do all 4 phases up front. That's why I was asking that question about separating out what you would find to be more beneficial. The other thing that I'm very wary of is relying too much on outside funding outside of the ARPA funds. Really, from what I've seen, the state really doesn't seem to have financial backing for our municipality to undertake something like this. And unless a real big miracle happens, I don't know that we can really look forward to getting any of that money. And I'm really concerned about borrowing anymore, especially during these economic times, because it just would seem counterproductive to taking on more debt, without getting any guarantees from outside sources like the state.
Right. No, I understand. But even after phase 1 and phase 2, there will be, benefit to everybody in that area. It's just that, constructing the gravity sewers all the way to the south, it's attractive, but you're not going to be able to pump any more than what you are during phase 1 and phase 2. So it's just kind of, it'll be detained under, you'll have some storage underground, but you're not really pumping it out anywhere. So that's the logic of the way it's phased.
Thank you.
Trustee Sheehan?
Thank you, Mr. President. We definitely have to get this going, and I appreciate everybody's efforts. I just had a couple of questions. Larry, when you mentioned the $5 million from Baird, that is money we could borrow right away with not having to go for an increase or a referendum, correct?
Correct. So the way that would be done is the same way that we have right now. We've done it as what's called an alternate revenue bond, which means you don't have to go directly to referendum. There is a backdoor referendum possibility after a public hearing, but you can borrow it without going out to referendum by pledging funds to pay the debt service, just like we have on the existing note. You pledge either the sewer fees or some additional other revenue sources if we needed it to bridge the gap until we pay off the other note.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So, I mean, with my math, if we can do the 5 million, and we get the 1.8 in the ARPA funds, and if the legislators hold true with next year, I think being an election year, I hope they would, 4 million from the state, my math, we're right at the 10 million. So we wouldn't have to necessarily go to a tax referendum increase, which is always good. I do have one question, and I'm sure this has been addressed, but the LaGrange Road sewer that belongs to IDOT, any of the three of you have any idea what condition it's in? Have they looked at it? Is there blockage? Is it clear? I mean, I'd hate like heck to spend all this money and then come to find out that IDOT's got a $2 or $5 million problem that they're sitting on, not helping the village of LaGrange Park and the residents.
Well, we have cleaned the sewers on LaGrange Road and televised them, and I don't know if, does IDOT own any on LaGrange Road? I don't think.
No, currently, IDOT has some storm sewers that are along LaGrange Road, but those are all dumped into our combination system. They don't have a direct outfall to anywhere. You know, when they widen the road, they put in their drains. They put in drains in some of the parkways that were big or low, where they can capture some water because of the elevation difference. But their storm sewer actually dumps into our system.
So I guess my concern is not knowing the condition of that. If it's blocked, separated, etc., and if it's forcing up pressure somewhere else that's pushing up in the parkway that's rolling down toward the tracks, how do we know?
Well, we would see that. I mean, you'd see a lot of substantial road flooding, but in the one map that we did, that area of north of Harding, in between like Jackson and Harding, those two blocks there, you don't really see a lot of road flooding there. We do see some down at like Oak. We do see some down at Pine, and there's one small intersection at Jackson, but I think that's just a a clogged catch basin versus an actual storm pipe being clogged, because you're not seeing a lot of ponding on the Grange Road itself.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious about the condition of that pipe. I wouldn't want $10 million on 100% of our taxpayers' backs.
Yeah, we actually did a whole bunch of cleaning on LaGrange Road the last few years. We actually did a lining section last year as well. So, I mean, again, we're maintaining those pieces, even though they're dumping into them.
Okay. All right, thank you. Yeah, so I would, question number one, I would support all, partial or all of the ARPA funds. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Trustee Sheehan. Trustee Seidel?
Thank you, Mr. President. I concur with what everything is said. I am definitely a resident that's impacted by this, so I am in full support. It needs to get done. There are residents here that also live in this area. I know we get questions all the time. I get questions daily from my neighbors on this, when it's going to happen. Ideally, it would be great to do it all at once. It is definitely an overdue project and needed. I am in full support of this, of course. As far as the ARPA funds, I'm in support of using a majority of them for it. I don't know if there's anything else that we would foresee them being needed for, but I am in full support of using those funds for this.
Thank you, Trustee Seidel. We started this storm management 2010, 2009, somewhere around there. We formed this, and since then, I think we've made tremendous progress from where we were to where we are now. But we're not there yet. We need more. And those folks down in the central area deserve the best they can get, and we need to move forward with this. I have more confidence in our legislators than my colleague. Hopefully we can get the money from them and work with them. They all seem to be very receptive and helpful, and the money's there, so we're going to look positively, and if we can get this done by 2023, God bless, let's do it. So I'm in favor of number one. So direction number one, question is yes, we're in favor of using most or all of it for the sewer project, storm management water sewer project. Question number two. Okay, do we want to progress engineering plans to a shovel-ready position? Let's start with Trustee Council first.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to see it go shovel-ready. simply because it needs to get done. So, I would say, yes, we need to go shovel ready. Thank you.
Thank you, trustee Sheehan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too have faith in our legislators too. It's just, if they say the money's there, the proof is in the pudding. Get it delivered to us, okay? It wasn't anything personal toward either one of those. I just wanted that for the record. And for question number 2, I would support that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Trustee Seidel?
Thank you, Mr. President. I am in full support of going shovel ready.
Thank you. Trustee Stewart?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm in full support as well, and you said 6 months, roughly, so, like yesterday, I support that. So, yeah, I definitely think that we should get the ball rolling on it as soon as possible, and, you know, the funding and how much we can borrow it's all pretty complicated, but we have 3 or 4 different avenues to get funding, so I think we just need to just kind of really just get started on this and really just try to exhaust as many resources as possible, because, you know, it's really concerning to a lot of residents, you know, and especially Trustee Seidel. I can hear like how much it pains her talking about it, and I think it's just priority number 1 again, and I support the getting engineering plans out there as well.
Thank you, Trustee Stewart. Trustee Zora?
I have another question. So if our deadline for potential MWRD funding is March, is that what you said, to submit? So they're opening it December and it ends in March, and then we don't know when award would be? Okay.
3 to 4 months.
Okay. I'm in support of moving forward. I think we have to be shovel ready in order to potentially get the funds. So yes, definitely move forward.
Thank you. And Trustee Lautner?
Thank you, Mr. President. As head of the Finance Committee, I generally don't like budget exceptions, but certainly, as we've discussed, I think this is certainly a need that we need to move forward. So, as referenced earlier, absolutely, I think we do need to move forward and would support it.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we need to be shovel ready. Okay, Julia?
Mr. President, we would be doing a budget amendment to make sure that this funding was documented. Certainly, we could do it at the end of the year. Would we do that sooner or later? Given the size.
Given the size, we prefer to do a budget amendment right away. And it certainly doesn't take any work to do a budget amendment.
Yeah, we don't want to upset the chairman of that committee.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, so there's the direction, Julia. And again, great
Thank you,
presentation,
Mr. President.
you guys. Rick, unbelievable. Very nice, thank you. I think everybody was informed tonight.
Mr. President, I have one question,
Yes.
clarification. All the detail, all the data that went into this, is that as a result of, or a big part of it from the GIS system that you brought in? I mean, the way that was represented was, you know, the clearest I've ever seen it. If that's GIS, that's a real indication of the importance and value of that application.
I mean, some of the maps that were created, just with basic lines were drawn, but there was a lot of maps that Hancock had from before as well. So, I mean, it's a mixture of everything. You know, I mean, we're just still so new at GIS. There's a lot of stuff in there, but the detailed stuff, like that one map I had with the way that the sewer system flows with all the different colors, yeah, that was GIS.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lautner. Okay, moving on. Trustee Sheehan?
Thank you, Mr. President. Next, we have the Meadowcrest and Woodside Road Resurfacing Program Contractor Award. The purpose is to seek the board's approval to award a contract with Lindhall Brothers, Inc. to complete the road program for $323,357.40, supported by a community development block grant through Cook County. The general background: last fiscal year, the village applied for a $400,000 community development block grant, CDBG program, through Cook County to repave the 11 and 1200 blocks of Meadowcrest and Woodside. In December, the village received notification that LaGrange Park is a grant recipient of $200,000 toward this project. Specifically, the project includes paving the 11 and 1200 blocks of Meadowcrest and Woodside Road from 31st Street to 29th Street. Work includes spot curb replacement to achieve a positive stormwater flow, patching deteriorated subbase, and grinding and resurfacing the roadway. Continuing it with past construction procedures, if curb replacement takes place at a driveway apron, the village will replace half the apron and seek participation from the homeowner for the remainder. Homeowner cooperation would result in a reimbursement to the funds below. The engineer's estimate for this project is $381,882.50. The village budgeted $130,000 in the MFT fund, 270-70-80100, and $70,000 in the road bond fund, 370-70-80100, to cover the village's local share of this project. The CDBG program provides funding in the form of reimbursement incrementally paid throughout project construction. As such, the portion of the project that will be reimbursed by the grant will be charged to the capital project fund to support project costs, as reserves are more than sufficient. This will require a future, budget amendment. Staff recommends entering into a contract with Lindahl Brothers for $323,357.40 for the Meadowcrest Woodside paving program. Therefore, Mr. President, I make a motion to accept the bid proposal from Lindahl Brothers in the amount of $323,357.40, and to authorize the village manager to execute the contract document.
Second.
Motion and second, discussion, trustee Sheehan?
Always like that it comes in under the engineer's estimate. Lindahl Brothers out of Bensonville is definitely a qualified company. I think they've got part of the pie for 294s, all that work that's going on there. So I think they can do 4 blocks in our town. So I would support this.
Thank you, trustee Stewart?
Thank you, Mr. President. So the 323, that's essentially under the budget, right? So we got the 200,000 grant, and then we have the 200,000 that's being budgeted, right? I'm sorry?
Yeah, we
Right,
have
it's a
200,000
lot less,
is
it's a
the,
lot less, 'cause we have 400, right?
well, we have 200,000 is the
Budget,
grant, and then we
grant.
we budgeted 130. No, wait.
Well, you have
Yeah.
130 in the.
So that's
770, right?
330,000.
Okay. Yeah, I approve the, motion to, authorize this amount. Thank you.
Thank you, trustee Council?
Full support, Mr. President.
Thank you, trustee Seidel?
Full support, Mr. President.
Thank you, trustee Zora?
I support this and thank you for getting in another grant.
And trustee Lautner?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just for clarification, what would the future budget amendment be, roughly, with the numbers here, roughly?
So it will be the amount that actually gets reimbursed from whatever that amount ends up being. We'll come up, so what will happen is that we have to front the money first for the whole project, and then whatever amount that we're getting from the county through the grant program
So that
would be the amount that we have to add into the capital projects fund
Correct.
as an expense because we have to pay that.
Yeah, that's okay to add.
But it'll actually be, what it'll be a wash in the capital projects fund.
Yeah. I would support.
Thank you, trustee Lautner. Megan, call the roll.
Trustee Lautner?
Yes.
Trustee Zora?
Yes.
Trustee Seidel?
Yes.
Trustee Council?
Yes.
Trustee Sheehan?
Yes.
Trustee Stewart?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Megan. And thank you, trustee Sheehan. Moving on, Finance Committee, trustee Lautner.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is about the American Rescue Plan Act. Purpose is to consider authorizing the acceptance of the Village's American Rescue Plan Act allotment. Sounds like it should be a no-brainer. But the background on this is the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, ARPA, appropriates $19.53 billion to states for the distribution to non-entitlement units of local government. Illinois' NEU allocation is $742 million for over 1,250 cities, towns, and villages with a population under 50,000. The Village of Grange Park's allotment is 1.7, let me be precise, $1,791,472.79 at this amount. This amount could increase if other NEUs do not claim their full funding. The Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity has been tasked with distributing the funds to Illinois' NEUs. NEUs must claim their funds by September 30, 2021. To claim the funds, the village must designate an authorized representative to certify that the village will use the funds for eligible purposes under the ARPA, comply with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, and sign the attached terms and conditions agreement. If the village claims the funds, 50% of the allotment will be paid within 30 days, and the other 50% paid a year later. Eligible uses, as we talked about earlier, of ARPA funds would include support public health expenditures, address negative economic impacts caused by the public health emergency, replace lost public sector revenue, provide premium pay for essential workers, or invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. The village is not required to decide how it will use the funds prior to claiming its allotment. Funds must be obligated to eligible uses by December 31st, 2024. Staff recommends the village board approve the acceptance of the ARPA funds and authorize the village president to sign the required certifications and agreements. So I would like to submit a motion to authorize the acceptance of American Rescue Plan Act funding and authorize the village president to sign the required certifications and agreements.
Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Motion and a second. Discussion. Trustee Lautner?
Thank you, Mr. President. As we've talked about significantly and extensively this evening, absolutely we want to accept these funds, and I think we'll have a place for every penny of it. So I would support.
Thank you. Trustee Zora?
I also support this.
Trustee Sheehan?
Support, Mr. President.
Trustee Stewart? Thank you. Trustee Council?
Support.
And Trustee Seidel?
Full support.
Megan, call the roll.
Trustee Lautner?
Yes.
Trustee Zora?
Yes.
Trustee Seidel?
Yes.
Trustee Council?
Yes.
Trustee Sheehan?
Yes.
Trustee Stewart?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously, Mr. President.
Thank you, Megan.
And that
thank you, Trustee
concludes the
Lautner.
finance report this evening.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to other reports. Village Manager Julia?
Mr. President, I have just one quick item to report on other than thank you for your patience for the presentation this evening. Just one quick update I wanted to provide to the village board was regarding some of the research that the police department is doing. Chief Contoys, Tim Contoys here at the table, at the staff table, has been doing some extensive research over the past few weeks, looking into the potential of video cameras in the community. And I just wanted to make you aware that he's been working with a number of vendors in order to get proposals on this. I think President DeCipio mentioned this at a previous meeting. And so he's kind of pulling all of that information together and spending a lot of time on that. And I don't know if maybe, Mr. President, we just wanted to offer up the chief to make
Sure.
a few comments about
Absolutely.
that, if he would.
Thank you.
I don't know how that's working.
Oh, it's working. Test. I'll keep it very short and brief. So, as Julia stated, I've dealt with two outside companies regarding closed-circuit television cameras or intersection cameras at numerous locations throughout town, as well as some of the parks as well. I've been working with the Park District on potential locations within those parks. I've met with two companies. I'm meeting with two more end of this week and then beginning of next week. we're trying to put some preliminary numbers together on what those cameras would cost, the storage of the data, as well as if it's going to be PoE, which is power over Ethernet, or if we're going to run them with data cards, which we currently have through Verizon's government plan. There's a $35 a month fee for that data to be transmitted, so it would be a wireless camera and not a PoE. So with the help from Rick, I've also dealt with Wally from Lions Pinner on power sources at some of the intersections and some of the locations within the park. So I've gotten varying numbers based on the type of camera system that they are, the abilities that they have, the facial recognition that they have, reading of license plates, so forth and so on. So Julie wanted me to give you a little brief overlay on what we've been doing, the work I've been doing, and there's more to come, so stand by.
Thank you, Chief. Is that it, Julia? Okay, thank you. Village Clerk. Thanks. I just have a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank the residents, the 2 residents that came tonight. Thank you for being here and listening to us, and hopefully we'll garner some input from you after the meeting. Hank Beckman's here. Hank's from the Doings, and Hank, thank you so much for coming and making LaGrange Park a priority for you. We appreciate your comments and everything you write about us, and hopefully we'll see you back again. As Julia stated, we met with the third representative, Representative Zaleski, last week. So we met with all 3 of them. I feel very encouraged by what they told us. All we can do is hope and move forward. The West Central Municipal Conference has their annual meeting in September 17th this year, I believe. It's September 17th. It's the Friday, September 17th. So any trustee that's wanting to go
I will
to
get
this,
that out.
Yeah, any trustee that wants to go to this function, just let Julia know. That's all that I have. Any new business? Yes, Trustee Sheehan.
Just a reminder for the meeting at Yena Park with the chief this Saturday, 9 a.m., correct?
That would be correct.
And the Park District will be there with you?
Park District, I believe, other staff members, department heads will be there as well. So we're anticipating a good showing of residents from the community and a good Q&A.
Thanks for doing that, and thanks for all you and staff do. Thank you.
Yeah, they're getting Krispy Kremes, right?
That's the hope, Mr. President.
It's been great working with the Park District. You know, after our discussions, Jessica is just phenomenal to work with. So we're very appreciative there. And if we can go into a joint venture with them with the cameras, that's great. Okay, no other new business? Seeing none, move to executive session. Trustee Lautner?
I'd like to make a motion to move into closed session for the purpose of discussing the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body in accordance with 5 ILCS 120/2C1, not to return to regular session until the next regularly scheduled meeting.
Okay, we got a second. Okay, motion and second. Megan, call the roll. Voice vote. All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Anybody opposed? Okay, we'll move into executive session. Everyone have a great week.